Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, there are a few inferences to draw from the fact that, firstly, Brian Laundrie's notebook was seized from the scene where his remains were found. Secondly, that the notebook hasn't been returned thus far. And thirdly, the FBI have had it for a while. What inferences can be drawn from those facts? I think the obvious one is that if Brian's notebook was a useless bundle of waterlogged pulp, it either wouldn't have been seized or it would have been returned some time ago. Now, there's an interesting article on Fox News where somebody said the human body can withstand water and wildlife better than paper. So you may have a situation where the notebook is or has been degraded substantially, and a lot of testing was done on it to try and rescue something somewhere out of possibly a bundle of pulp. But what if there is something in the notebook? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind we are also still discussing this case and other high-profile cases on Patreon, so look out for that. And also, if you enjoyed this video, like, share, and leave a comment. Right, and let's get started. So I think the length of time the FBI have had with the notebook, more than 2 months and counting, suggests it has some forensic value, perhaps a lot. And it's possible the FBI feel the notebook may be of use in a legal sense. Otherwise, why else would they be holding on to it? Now, you could also argue that they're not holding on to it, they simply have it in their custody, and that there's a legal process that needs to be met in order for certain possessions to be handed back to the people that should have them, right? On the other hand, if much of Brian's notebook was ruined, it's possible that extensive, expensive and time-consuming tests had to be conducted in order to attempt to rescue words and texts. Perhaps if one page was rescued of dubious worth, perhaps if there was some success rescuing a single page, more would have gone through the same process, and one can imagine that taking a while. Personally, because Brian was an artist, a creative, an introvert and a loner, because he didn't really have much friends and because he read a lot and sketched a lot, I think it's likely that he expressed something in his notebook, not only after he left Grand Teton, but during the summer epic and even before that. I think it's also possible Brian may have left a suicide note for his parents, who after all he knew were just around the corner from where he was in the woods. If he knew he couldn't get to them, and we know he was emotional when he left his father, perhaps he wrote something privately to and for his family, knowing there was no way out for him and knowing how he intended to exit his situation. Writing things down may have been some small comfort to him alone in the woods with his thoughts, and his sketchbook was a familiar place for sharing his inner world. The question is, would Brian have been aware of the issue of the notebook being ruined? And would he have taken any precautions to try and protect it? Would he have put it in some kind of plastic sleeve, or was it actually in his backpack? And was his backpack waterproof? I think those are all certainly possible. I don't know whether the notebook was simply found lying out in the open. If it was, probably very little to salvage. If it wasn't, there might well be quite a lot to salvage. I also think the notebook probably was filled with the same sort of sketches as those on his Instagram. Bear in mind, his Instagram included photos of and from his notebook. And perhaps his notebook will also have some of the same things we saw on his Pinterest page. Probably a lot of it is designs. Brian, after all, was a designer. But it might also include cryptic words, quotes, and remarks, in particular from his favorite author. If there's one thing we've noticed, it's that Brian was more than a little cryptic in his style, including on Instagram. But if we're trying to gain insight into Brian's mind, I think there's a far better source, potentially, in the book that he and Gabby were reading in the lead up to the summer epic. In fact, it's underneath his sketchbook in this image. The background to the lullaby book held up in Gabby's left hand, if you look at the background around that book, can you see it's the inside of the van in one of Gabby's Instagram posts? So lullaby is definitely part of the thought fabric of the Gabby Petito case, and it was something that Brian and Gabby both read and seemed to be quite enthusiastic about. Some of the supporters of this channel have read and studied lullaby. I've also ordered it on Amazon, I've received it, I have it, and I've gone through some of it. Perhaps it's time to see why lullaby was such a big deal to the artist, and what message the book may have given Brian when things went to pot.
Worth playing for?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do in an episode following this is one of the super fans of this channel has actually read lullaby from start to finish. I think she's even read it twice. She's taken notes, and I'm going to leave it to her to record a review of the book in her own words. It's going to come from Stephanie. I've already read her review. It's really good, but I'd like her to share it in her own words. And one of the reasons why I don't really want to be reviewing another author's work is I sort of feel like it's not really my place to do that. As an author myself, I don't really think it's my place to prognosticate, certainly at length, on another author's work. I don't mind making a few observations and highlighting the odd quote and interpreting certain aspects that are either intertextual or may have relevance in the fabric of the true crime case. But in terms of reviewing a book, I really don't think it is my place to do that. So I'm not going to take it further than that. You can look out for this review of Lullaby in the next day or two. But probably the next video is also going to be dealing with two books dealing with the JonBenet Ramsey case. One from Paula Woodward and the other from Detective Kolar. And what I've done is I've gone to both books to source their respective opinions on the autopsy. And I know there's been a lot of speculation that DNA is the key to solving this case. But I think a much bigger key, a much stronger key, is the aspect to what really happened to JonBenet in terms of the autopsy. I think that is a much better, stronger key to figuring out who, what, when, and why. So look out for that as well. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.